Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Dirks, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, How Libraries Can Support Pre-Health Students and Advisors, which is sponsored by Jove. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice. For the users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd just like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you should be able to follow along with the presentation materials. Along the right-hand side, you may see a Q&A panel and perhaps a chat panel. If you don't, you can click the button along the bottom of your screen that looks like a dialog cloud to open up the chat panel. And you can find the Q&A panel, if it's not on your screen, under the three little dots. Please use the Q&A panel to submit your questions to our speakers. At the end of the presentation, we'll take some time to answer all the questions that we get, or as many as we have time for. So please do send in your questions throughout. If you experience any technical issues, that's what the chat is for. Please send me a message and we will troubleshoot the issue privately. Today, we're using the hashtag ACRLChoiceWebinars. So if you've got another screen handy, shout out to us. We're at choice_reviews on Twitter. Also note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archived version. All right, I think that's just from me, so I will turn the floor over to Colin for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. My name is Colin Trainer. I'm a Customer Success Manager for Jove, the Journal of Visualized Experiments. And unfortunately, she is caught in a meeting right now, so I'll just introduce her. My colleague, Claire Winthrop, who is our Director of Customer Success at Jove. And together we've been two of the members of our team who have been working with PreHealth advising and PreHealth students for about the last year. Claire will try to get on in a little bit if she can, but if not, I will be the lead representative from Jove.
Hello, this is Francisco Castellan. I am the PreHealth Advisor Manager at Georgia Institute of Technology, and been currently at Georgia Tech for about 4 years, working with all the students and applying all the different health professions. Thank you all so much for this opportunity.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aliya Bhimani. I'm the Director of Academic Advising in the Office of Academic Advising at Rice University. We're located in Houston, Texas, and my office actually does all the specialized advising, including pre-health, pre-law, and other specialized groups. Glad to be here today.
So first off, thank you everyone for participating. I will speak for the rest of us. We really appreciate it. We want to start off with giving a brief overview of what PreHealth entails and what kind of programs or majors typically fall under that field of study, because it is a little bit more than just pre-med specifically. So obviously, PreHealth does include pre-medical tracks, which are oftentimes a biology or chemistry major specifically, but in a specific track of courses or education for pre-medical requirements. PreHealth also includes dentistry, pharmacy, optometry, veterinary programs, physical therapy, nursing, physician's assistant. All of these tracks fall under the PreHealth umbrella, and they all include a broad range of required STEM courses involved in biology or chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, etc., biochemistry as well. And these are typically programs that we've seen on campuses around the country in the last year.
I can go ahead and tell you that here at Rice, the majors or programs that fall under PreHealth, it doesn't actually work that way. So PreHealth is not a track or a major at Rice. We actually encourage students to study or major in anything that is of interest to them, as long as they take a set of prerequisites that are necessary for either the pre-med track or any of these individualized tracks that Colin just mentioned.
And to add to that, at Georgia Tech, it's very similar, where students are able to select any major of their choice. And then our goal is to support them to help them understand how that major can be a resource or a tool as they proceed to any of the health professions. These professional programs typically aren't focusing on the major. They are focusing on the prerequisite courses and standardized exams, interviews, and other elements of the application process to identify competitive applicants. And so our goal is to help students navigate through the series of prerequisite courses and then help them connect to the resources for MCAT and other entrance exam preparation.
All right, so in speaking about kind of PreHealth and what does that mean, let me give you a little bit of a background of PreHealth at Rice. So our undergraduate population is about 4,000 students here at Rice. We're a private school that's based on a liberal arts education with a strong STEM backing. We are across the street from the world's largest medical center, and so that has been very advantageous for our students to take advantage of. About 400 students of a class of 1,000 matriculating freshmen will indicate or express interest in something PreHealth related when they get here at Rice. So we have a very large population that is interested in something in the PreHealth professions. Typically, over time, that dwindles down to about half the size. So we eventually have about 200 students sustain interest in the health professions and that apply into these various programs. So we support about 200 students per cycle. Most of them fall under the pre-med track for us. We only have a handful of students that will apply to dental school and some of these others that were mentioned, but primarily most of our students are interested in the MD or osteopathic medicine route, the DO track.
And to add to the picture, at Georgia Tech, we are a public institution. We have about 32,700 plus total enrollment, with a little bit over 16,000 being undergraduate. Within that population, we typically see right now a current incoming class about 3,000 students. We estimate, because PreHealth, again, is not a major, there are some majors that do have some of the prerequisites embedded within them, but we look at approximately anywhere between 1,000 to 1,200 current students and alumni. That's a little bit unique also in our offices, that we do work with alumni as well. And so we guesstimate that our population is anywhere between 1,000 to 1,200 on an ongoing basis. Within that, I think putting into the context of institution that is heavily known for engineering, that is usually surprising for many folks to see a strong engineering program have such a high pre-med or pre-health focus. And I think, again, that speaks a lot to the fact that medical schools aren't focusing on major, but rather the training and the background and the different kind of tools that students have gained throughout their undergraduate experience.
So now I'll talk a little bit about a typical student workload within or under a PreHealth umbrella, looking at, for example, pre-med or a pre-med track. Francisco and Aliya just talked about what actually is included in PreHealth on their campuses. And obviously they're working with students more so than we are at Joe, but in working with the administrators on a few campuses, we've seen a few typical examples where freshman year they may be required to take calculus as well as a couple chemistry courses or a chemistry lab. Sophomore year then is some biology lab courses or organic chemistry. Junior year includes more upper level biology, like a neuroscience or a biochemistry course, as well as taking the MCAT. And then senior year, more upper level courses. And, this is no campus in particular, just a few examples that we've seen. And these are also combined with summers that would be spent interning or gaining clinical experience, as well as the standard student workload of non-major required courses and maintaining personal health and working to support oneself. So it is a pretty significant workload that's placed upon these students who are, trying to prep for entry into medical school or a similar role. And in fact, I was just meeting with the pre-med advisor at the University of South Dakota yesterday, and he actually told me that he advises his students, when it comes to the MCAT, not study for it or take it when they're already in either their fall semester or spring semester courses, because he said it's just simply too much for them to focus on. So that's one example, and now Francisco and Aliya can talk a little bit more about the specific requirements on their campuses as well.
Sure. So here at Rice, we actually tell students, similar to what Colin was saying, they're taking a set of courses, science specific, but also courses that are outside of the sciences that are complementing their major. I think the other things that are happening are co-curricular activities. And so we stress that, students should be well-rounded when they're applying in these these highly selective application processes. And so we stress participating in activities like community service, leadership, shadowing, right, getting the hands-on exposure to the field, altruistic activities, leadership, research. These are all things that also complement the curricular components that Colin just mentioned.
And I would also add that depending on the structure of every institution, access to these courses can be dependent on what the departments decide as prerequisites. At Georgia Tech, students can come in and do biology, chemistry, or physics, typically without needing any prerequisites. I think physics is the only one that may have a calculus prerequisite, and so some students may not be ready to take the physics course because of not having a math prerequisite, but typically most first-year students can actually begin with those three areas to consider. And I would agree with Aliya as well about the well-roundedness of applicants and students doing extensive, not just community service, but definitely campus involvement, leadership opportunities, and even engagement. We do see at Tech a lot of students go into co-ops and internships in summer as part of like understanding their industry that they're thinking about as a major, but also to continue to test to decide if medicine is going to be the best fit. So we at Tech, the PreHealth Advising Office is under the Career Center, so that provides an opportunity to also work with career advisors and then the employer relations team on identifying industry-based experiential learning opportunities for students.
So I think this next slide shows sort of the timeline for medical school admissions, generally speaking. We sort of tell students it takes about a year from when you start applying to medical school to when you get into medical school. So a traditional applicant who's looking to matriculate to medical school right after their undergraduate career is looking to start the application process as early as their junior year in college. And so here at Rice, these students would work with us through the duration of that year to prepare their application materials, make sure they're prepared for interviews and personal statements and all of those good things. Increasingly so, we're seeing a number of students that are applying in the non-traditional track, meaning they're applying a little bit later on So they would have gap years between their undergraduate career and their matriculation to a pre-health program. And in our conversations with medical schools and other health profession schools, they actually think that this is great. They think that students are able to show their own maturity over time, and they welcome gap years as long as they're productive ones. And in terms of MCAT prep, at Rice, students have in the past are eager to get requirements done and take the MCAT exam as soon as they can. But I think what we're seeing are schools that are asking for requirements that are newer. So for example, Colin mentioned earlier biochemistry being a requirement that used to not be something required of students prior to matriculation. And with some of these requirements comes taking the courses. And so students are finding themselves taking these courses into their junior year. And we're actually encouraging students not to take the MCAT until they have fully prepared. And oftentimes that is not until your junior year. So that's kind of the guidance that we give to students over here.
Yes, I would like to highlight that nationally, students applying to specifically medical school, we will see a high percentage, meaning above 50%, maybe closer to 60% of first-time applicants to medical school having at least one or more bridge years or gap years between undergrad and medical school. That's becoming the norm. And so not only because of the extensive content on the MCAT that has been added since 2015, but also because of all the demands of the prerequisite courses and extracurricular activities, students needing more time to be a stronger, more competitive applicant for medical schools has impacted these timelines. I think at Georgia Tech, we're seeing very similar numbers where many students are opting to add an additional year between undergrad and medical school just to continue to strengthen their application, but definitely have additional time for the MCAT. The MCAT now is a 7.5-hour test that since 2015 added biochemistry, more extensive biochemistry, statistics, psychology, and sociology. So that's an additional 4 courses of content that is now part of that extensive test. And so that typically creates a unique challenge where students sometimes have to identify balancing preparing and taking for the MCAT while potentially also being in courses or moving their application timeline further down so that they can build in that MCAT prep and test time.
Yeah, so as Francisco and Aliya just explained, or demonstrated better than I can, the requirements and workload for students getting ready to take an exam like the MCAT is pretty significant. In some cases, much more than students outside of a pre-health field may have. But there are certainly a wealth of resources that are available for students. Most commonly, I think Kaplan creates a very detailed, well-rounded MCAT prep resource. Khan Academy is also a free resource that students can use. Princeton Review has a lot as well. And additionally, there are a ton of resources available for students on the AAMC website of resources they can use as they're studying, both free resources and paid resources as well. And something that I can speak about a little bit is in the last year, largely with the partnership of Francisco and Aliya, Jove has been developing a resource for pre-health students as well, where it's not anything new or not meant to replace something like Kaplan, but what we've done is take the MCAT syllabus from the AAMC website and look at what content Jove has that's relevant to the topics on the MCAT or the questions, such as biochemistry or psychology or organic chemistry or cell biology, and put it together in really a playlist that students can use or advisors such as Francisco and Aliya can share as a supplement for some of the other MCAT prep resources that they have. So this is something that Jove's customer success team built and developed as a way for libraries to get more usage out of their Jove subscription. So I know on a few campuses I've spoken with folks from the library about it, or PreHealth advisors. So those are just some of the resources that are available. Francisco and Aliya, feel free to add any more that I might have missed.
I'll jump in and share that, students are typically facing, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges students face with this, but because there is so many potential third-party vendors on resources and per sale cost, the cost becomes a factor, but it's tough for students to navigate identifying what are the best resources, and again, also typically looking for what resources can my institution provide internally. They feel they've put a lot of investment into their tuition, into the resources on their campus, that when it comes to preparation for MCAT, they are facing a lot of potential resources, with also a lot of social media around what is claimed to be the best resource for MCAT prep or any of the other entrance exams to these professional programs. So, just wanted to kind of lead in a little bit to some of our future conversation about those challenges that students face.
Yes, I would echo Francisco. I mean, I think there are a lot of resources out there, and sifting through what to use is often a question that comes up here, and I think on campuses across the country. So it is hard. It's been helpful to have sort of resources that are free and available. So things like the Jove playlist have been incredibly helpful for our students when access is part of it.
I like to also add a little bit of the history too. When the new MCAT was created in 2015, they didn't have a full practice test to even release to students to prepare for, and so that's how the Khan Academy resource was actually created, is a partnership with the AMC, where they did a national competition for faculty and anybody that taught some of the content within what is covered in the MCAT. And that's how they were able to build a large library of both questions bank and then also videos, presentations on the subjects and content that's covered in the MCAT. And then that resource became the free resource that the AMC does offer as part of their collaboration and transitioning to the new MCAT. And that resource has been essential for students. Last time I had heard, over 40 to 50% of students who do test prep incorporate the free resource directly through Khan Academy, and then they supplement that. So it is very possible that students are often incorporating multiple resources for their MCAT prep, and even overlapping test prep from multiple third-party sources. So it's not rare that I see a student that has some Kaplan books, but they might also have a Princeton Review data set, and then they also incorporate Khan Academy. So it's not just one source, but it's a mix of different resources, and it oftentimes might be financially driven. Other times it's just what fits their learning style. And so I think that'll be another part of our conversation later on that I think is important, is understanding that there are multiple learning styles, and that's part of our conversation oftentimes with pre-health students, about helping them understand what is their learning style and what resource is going to be a better fit for them.
Yeah, so I think that leads directly into the next point that we wanted to talk about, was some of the challenges faced by students. And I think Francisco even alluded to some of these resources, such as Kaplan, are very expensive. I know, for example, Kaplan could cost upwards of $1,700 for students to use, which, while it's a fantastic resource, that is a significant financial burden for students, especially some that, may come from a lower socioeconomic or disadvantaged background, where, paying for textbooks or college itself is already a pretty high financial burden, and adding something as expensive as that on top of it can really be a challenge for students. And in addition to the financial cost of the resources, just the difficulty of the material is a significant challenge, where courses like organic chemistry, students need to ace, and they're not easy subjects to learn. And when studying for the MCAT, it's a lot of these difficult courses compounded on top of one another. So it's a really, really challenging curriculum to study for, and the time necessary to invest it to be successful. So, for example, I mentioned the PreHealth advisor here at the University of South Dakota I just spoke with the other day, who advised his students to avoid studying and taking the MCAT while they're in their current courses, because it is just too much. There is only so much time that students can devote to studying these, and if they need to work full time or part-time to help provide or help pay for their way through school, the time commitment can be pretty significant as well. And I'll allow Francisco and Aliya to expand on that anymore too.
Thank you, Colin. I think you hit a lot of the key components. It is a balancing of the rigor, the demand of courses. It's also managing their time so that they can balance all their extracurriculars, and then as they get nearer to preparing for the MCAT, incorporating this to what they're already balancing on their plate. A really good way to kind of put this into a little bit more concrete example that I use with a lot of my students is, if you think of the MCAT prep as a 4-credit course, so that means full lecture with a full lab course, and the time that a student spends in class, out of class, and then in the lab, outside of lab with lab reports and so forth, that's about the time commitment for the MCAT, and that typically ranges from a 3 to 4 month prep time. So hopefully that example can give folks a better understanding of the demand of taking the MCAT, and that's added on top sometimes of a full semester of being full-time student. And for some students, maintaining full-time status is critical to financial aid and financial security. There is unfortunately unique circumstances for students that we actually do see students on campus who are homeless just to be able to afford covering tuition and other costs that, we are at TAC are trying to identify other resources to help students navigate the financial demand in addition to the time management that goes along with being pre-health. And so that kind of hits a lot of the key pieces of the challenges students face. And one that's kind of a little bit more subtle that I like to add is that, this is a tough process to go through, while there's still being some uncertainty if it's the right career choice, if it's going to be the right fit. So on top of that, students are walking through this process and hitting these challenges, while at the same time continuously evaluating if this profession is going to be the best fit, and if that's going to be the best commitment of their time, because it is a long-term professional commitment with 4 years of medical school, and then anywhere to 4 to 7 years for residency, plus additional postdoc and fellowships afterwards. So it's a challenging expectation for any student that that's coming right out of a high school to make a large commitment. And so we do see students that may start off pre-med or pre-health and change their mind, but then they return in the 3rd or 4th year. So our role really has to be flexible to work with students who may be on very different continuums of where they are in their own personal development, their career development, or their professional development as well. So we're trying to be resources for all those pieces for students.
Yeah, I would add, it's definitely a competitive process. There's a lot of stress and pressure on students. And like Francisco said, I think figuring out what pathway that students should take is important. Part of what we do is help them reflect on that to figure out if this is the career pathway for them. I know at Rice we offer courses like a medical exploration and observership course. There are some minors in like medical humanities, courses on medical ethics, and other courses that allow students to explore the career options also available. But I think, fundamentally it is an access issue too. So this is a challenge by a lot of students who don't have the funds, right? And we talked a lot about MCAT, and the costs can be very, very high. just to take the test and have the test prep materials available to them, but also the applications themselves, the travel to and from for interviews, for campus visits. You know, we've estimated for a competitive applicant that's applying to a very modest and reasonable amount of medical schools can cost the student upwards of $10,000 just to apply, take all your exams, make sure that you're getting to interviews. And so these are things that people don't realize as they're entering into some of these professions as well.
So now that we've talked about just the rigors that this population of students on most campuses will go through, you know, we can look at how libraries can help be supportive or help these students out. And you know, obviously, if the library is the main hub of knowledge or of resources on a campus, there are ways that they can be involved and work with pre-health advising offices such as Aliya or Francisco's to help support these students. And you know, one of them is just by holding resources that won't cost the students any money. So, like we said, a lot of these resources are prohibitively expensive for some students. If there is a way that libraries can house resources or collections or have a LibGuide set up of MCAT prep resources, for example, that can help support the students, that they know they can go to the library as a place to find support rather than having to purchase so many of these things outright. You know, for example, if there were resource days at the library or coordinating outreach to subject liaisons. So, you know, for example, if there are, like I believe Aliya mentioned at Rice, a lot of students are a biology major, but they're within the pre-med track or under the pre-med umbrella, having the biology liaison for the library work with the faculty to, you know, pass along resources that students have access to. You know, for example, just, you know, because I have to represent Jove, the PreHealth resource that we helped put together for subscribing institutions, that is something that our subscribing libraries have access to that they can share, that students wouldn't need to pay for as the library is footing the bill. And obviously it's not as thorough as a Kaplan or Princeton Review, but it is a supplement that can be helpful. Additionally, I believe Francisco and Aliya might have mentioned that students who are taking the MCAT or applying are coming from a variety of backgrounds. So if libraries can set up a LibGuide or a resource hub in addition to what the pre-health office may already have, that can be a good way to get students caught up to the same base level for the MCAT that, you know, a student who's a chemistry major may have a different level of knowledge compared to a student who's coming in from sociology background. And if libraries can help provide resources to get them both caught up and level the playing field, that can be a significant help for students. So I'll let Francisco and Aliya add on any other resources that they may find helpful or any other ways that libraries can be involved.
Yeah, I think I would echo what you said, Colin. You know, having access to books or test prep materials, or like you said, subject specialists that advising units could actually have, you know, advertise to students. So, for example, with the Jove list, we've been able to send that out to our list of peer academic advisors and our tutors, if you will, what we call our fellow mentors, our content specialists, that can go out and tell students, hey, there are these great resources that exist, or even if there are library materials that can be checked out on MCAT test prep, or partnerships to create, you know, personal statement workshops or things like that can help students specifically in this realm.
I'm really excited about this topic and just helping think about, think outside of the box and what does this mean for students. And, I'm consider myself old school where, I still remember the libraries where you had, to look things up by hand versus online, and how the libraries have transitioned and changed as I've worked in higher education for over 20 years, and seeing how new libraries are being built. Georgia Tech right now is in the process of building a brand new library and completing its final stages, and seeing their new layouts and structures really allow me to see the engagement with students in a very different light. I'm going to highlight some key pieces that have stood out for me. Is that, first I want to highlight that it's very clear that libraries are flipping their models on their structure and the delivery of services. So, under that umbrella, thinking about what is the resource that can be a benefit to advisors, but not just advisors. I think if you think about advisors across a campus, libraries are now creating spaces that allow to invite other faculty and staff and students in a very unique way. So I think of things like creating advising outreach centers, places where it's a common space that different advisors can rotate through from different colleges or different departments, including pre-med and pre-health, so that it invites students to go into the library and recognize what resources are available there, while also being able to connect with advising to help them see the value of the space, and then work with them in an environment where a student might already be in studying for exams and so forth. That's one example. The other component that I'm excited about is understanding technology. One of the unique aspects of being a pre-med or pre-health advisor is that we get to visit these medical schools and other health professional programs, and we get to see the latest technology, not just in their anatomy labs and in their training and clinical and virtual simulation labs, but also in their libraries, and seeing some of the things that some of the medical schools are providing their medical students. The libraries can potentially be a better link to show a pre-med or pre-health students the technology that they'll be exposed to in medical school. And so investing in technology that might mirror what medical schools are using provides students a better transition to their learning style, so that once they are in medical school, they already are comfortable with that technology. And then third, the one piece that really stands out for me is that when you think about space, one of the elements that I'm seeing a lot of libraries beginning to build in and incorporate are actual classrooms. And those classrooms can be very strategic for an institution. One of the things that I'll be looking at here at Georgia Tech is how do we use our space to potentially host our own MCAT prep course. Sometimes there is opportunities to build some sort of agreement, both either financial or just a collaboration, a mutual understanding of MOUs, with usually a memorandum of understanding or collaboration with test prep companies, where you can actually host a MCAT prep course, or you may be able to recruit faculty to teach courses that are a better resource for students and might be more cost friendly for students to do a test prep right on campus in their own library. So again, looking at space for access for advisors, looking at technology, and then also looking at how MCAT prep could be an area for growth for a library to not just provide resources for students, but actual space for their MCAT preparation.
Sorry, one thing just to compound on what Francisco was just saying, something that I've seen on a couple campuses, for example, American University in DC has this where their Blackboard LMS administration system is the administrators housed within the library, both his physical office, and then I believe in the departmental structure, they fall under the library. And that is where their pre-med advisor houses her resources like test prep or practice quizzes are in Blackboard. So that's another area for any libraries out there. If their LMS administrators fall under the library, they can be brought in as well, just to utilize that platform to host resources or test questions as well. So those are just a few examples of how libraries and pre-health advising or different campus departments can collaborate and work together. So I think Francisco and Aliya, feel free to chime in, but outreach between offices in the library or pre-health can lead to some pretty significant support for students, as everyone kind of shares the same goal of helping these students succeed, and increased collaboration on campus between departments can lead to some pretty interesting and unique opportunities to support students through test prep, or even having the physical location like a classroom where they can host courses or test prep can really be a benefit.
I would strongly agree that the collaboration piece is essential. For me, being in the pre-health advising world, collaboration has to happen across all the different departments, and because we work with students across all majors, those relationships become essential. Not only is it a great way to understand what's happening in their area and how do we better support our students, but also how can we collaborate to develop either resources or services, or again, it might just be a simple, let's find a space where we can be at your location so that students have better access to the advising piece, or vice versa. Sometimes students want to connect with their faculty in a very unique way. And so through the library system at any university or campus, again, it could be a place where most folks look at a student center or a union or something like that to host a major event. But given that the new layouts and structures of libraries are also creating a potential place to be able to host some of these key opportunities to build that collaboration, or to bring people together to have some conversations about how do we create resources to support a very specific population. And so I think the resources available through any library and the expertise of librarians across the country is a resource that is underutilized. And for me, it's a consistent reminder that there's always room for growth and collaboration.
Absolutely. I think what Francisco said about thinking outside of the box in ways that we can actually bring our units together to help students is key. And that includes librarians, advisors, and even our faculty across campus.
One thing that just kind of came to mind as well is that we're seeing a lot of different technology being used to help build collaborations and communication. So things like Piazza and Canvas and other online tools can be a link to help students and faculty and advisors even communicate key resources. We all live in a world of email being as kind of the primary mode for communication. And sometimes internally, a lot of institutions are building other apps and applications. There's Slack, there's Teams within Microsoft. And so there's a lot of unique tools in technology now that can be a resource to build a community of support system and collaboration. So that's an area that I think is still underutilized and still a lot of room for growth, to see how do you connect virtually in a way that still allows people to work collaboratively and yet reach a higher number of individuals and keep a conversation going on what is needed on that specific campus and what are the resources and who are the key stakeholders that need to be part of the conversation, and then being able to identify those resources to launch any new initiatives. So using technology in a way that allows for that collaboration to grow is something that I'm excited about as well.
All right, excellent. This is Mark from ACRL and Choice. Unless you have a word to wrap up here with, Colin, I think we're ready to jump into the questions. Does that sound all right?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope this was insightful.
Excellent. All right, we've got a few questions in the hopper already, but I would encourage those of you out there listening in, if you have questions for Francisco or Aliya or Colin, drop them into the Q&A and we will get to as many as we have time for. All right, so looking back at the questions here, I see the first one that I see that came up, I think will not take too long to answer, but Josette asked a little earlier, what was the playlist you were referring to? Could you tell us a little more about maybe what went into the playlist that Joe put together for MCAT prep? What sorts of things are on there, and how can folks get a hold of it?
Yeah. So this is something that Joe put together. Francisco is actually the one who helped us come up with the idea about a year ago almost. It just is another way to maximize how Jove could be used with our subscribing institutions. Another way for them to really get their money's worth. And what we did, how we put it together, it's not necessarily a brand new resource or not new material, but we looked at the syllabus for the MCAT as well as some of the study books or the textbooks, some of the study guides, and just noted what content is in there that we have access to. And so what we did was actually just put together a list of it's a bulleted list of all the videos that Jove has both in our science education section as well as the research journal that would be relevant based on what they're covering. And we divided it up by the foundational concepts within the MCAT. So looking at some of the topics like biological and biochemical foundations of living systems, there are videos on gel electrophoresis, DNA, ligation reactions, PCR techniques. And we have that for, cell biology, chemistry, psychology as well. We looked at, and by we, I mean our customer success team, which includes individuals with lab research backgrounds, teaching backgrounds, PhDs in genetics, cell biology, neuroscience. And we just, kind of compiled a list of, okay, if you're studying chemical and physical foundations for biological systems, here are all the general chemistry videos. Here are all the organic chemistry videos that align with content based on the syllabus for the MCAT as well as the MCAT textbooks. So I know Francisco and Aliya have both shared it with their students as Georgia Tech and Rice both subscribe. If you ever wanted to see it, it's actually on our website right now under the For Librarians button near the top. There's the Resource Hub where it's a PDF with all live links on it. So if you open the PDF, if you click on a bullet point that says restriction enzyme digest, for example, is the very first one, it'll take you to that video. So that's a little bit about the Jove PreHealth resource. Like I said, it's not new content specifically, but it is just content that we already have that a lot of libraries already subscribe to, just repurposed and repackaged in a way to be helpful for pre-health students. And it's feedback I've gotten in particular from some pre-med students is that it's a great supplement to things like Kaplan or Khan Academy, where a lot of those focus solely on the concepts of some of these, like cell biology or organic chemistry, and then the questions on the actual exam are more how are those concepts applied. And a lot of our videos are on laboratory techniques, so they felt that it was a helpful supplement to some of the resources they were already using. And especially if the library is a subscriber and the students don't need to pay for it, that's a pretty sweet incentive for them as well.
Excellent. We have a question here from Diane who who says, for many students, English is not their first language, which can also present additional challenges. And I would ask you, Francisco and Aliya, have you seen that, where in working with students for whom English is not their first language, can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges and what that looks like?
I'm happy to jump in and say yes. Georgia Tech does bring in a large percentage of international students, a significant percentage of international students, and also students that may be U.S. citizens that, again, are also multilingual, so English may not be their first language. And that really is a process of our role is to connect them to the resources that could help them with that process. Some institutions do provide actual classes for English as a second language, courses, support, coaching sometimes. So those are all great resources that we typically incorporate when as needed, because again, we are also working with the whole application process, not just the transition to academics at an institute, but also the application process and being able to write well. We partner up with our communication center. We have a writing lab, and so we also work with undergrads and graduate students and some postdoc fellows who are here to support our students in their writing, not just grammar and structure and so forth. And so depending on the different needs of the student and where they're at in their application cycle, we are a great resource to help students identify other resources on campus. And so oftentimes our role can be multiple hats so that we can connect students to resources. And my kind of rule of thumb is that if I don't know the answer, I surely know somebody that does have an answer, and that typically is how we work with students, is that, let's get them connected to the key resource that is going to best help them in that transition and be able to transition to an academic rigor and be able to stay on top of their academics. And, that's going to be a bigger challenge down the road when they are preparing for the MCAT. So again, we're not looking at it as just MCAT prep, but in the transition to college as well.
I would agree. We have all of those similar resources here at Rice. I would just also mention that the plight of the international student applying to American medical colleges is actually quite competitive. Unfortunately, not all medical schools in the U.S. accept international students. And so there are some barriers for those students and extra challenges to be even more academically prepared.
A good point, and very, very interesting as well. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. So we've got another question here from Beth, who asks, what might some collaboration events look like? Do you have any examples or some additional things that you could add about collaborating with libraries?
I can add one that I just I keep mentioning. This guy I just met with yesterday, Dr. Robert Bird, who's the pre-med advisor at the University of South Dakota. The University of South Dakota Library is a Jove subscriber, and that's why I met with him yesterday. But he mentioned something in particular that the library does, not for pre-health students necessarily, but for the actual medical students, where they will have a day where the library will come in and meet with these students and walk them through how to navigate research journals, how to identify them online, and pick out which ones they're looking for, as well as how to cite them, how to use them, and then later on, down the road, if they're interested, possibly even publishing with them. But the library came in and walked them through, the world of navigating research journals and how to sort through them online. So that's one example I can think of based off a conversation I had yesterday. Another example that I think would be helpful is, hypothetically, if a library were to put together a LibGuide or a resource page of just even free resources that students have access to, how they can compile that into just one one spot that students can find everything, and then work with the pre-health advising office or whichever pre-med office to curate that list and identify these are all the free resources that students have access to right away. If not actually outright purchasing resources, but those are just a couple examples I can think of.
Excellent. And Francisco or Aliya, do you have anything you'd like to add?
For me, I think about it as, libraries are a source of not just pertinent, relevant information in the academic world, but I think they're a key link to the faculty and staff. I mentioned earlier how many faculty are incorporating things like Canvas and Piazza and all these other unique tools in their courses, and you can start seeing how they're embedding videos, they're developing data sets or question banks for practicing material or reviewing material for their courses. And I think the libraries can be a critical resource for inviting that collaboration and bringing that collaboration together with faculty and staff. But then I think about it from the research perspective, and libraries also can help in the training of, preparing students to go into a research lab and housing unique set of materials that a faculty or a unique lab would like to have all their lab employees or staff review and house trainings for research and launching labs and establishing protocols for the grant writing. So again, there's a lot of potential collaborations that I see that libraries are a critical partner, not just with the pre-health advisors, but through faculty and staff on campus. On the student side, again, when we look at the unique use of space, making partnerships with key campus offices that could potentially spend time in the library and bring in students and consistently show how they have and house all the resources that might be helpful for whether it's preparing for a course and being successful in their academics to preparing for a very competitive and rigorous entrance exam, to then also just being able to provide a space for students to continue to advance their own study habits and being in a place that's very welcoming and inviting.
Yeah, I think, part of it is I would throw the question back at everybody on the call and to ask, what are ways that we could collaborate? Because that's half the fun, is to figure it out. I think somebody has commented that working in a medical library or creating an internship to work with the campus biomedical library would definitely be another experience and a partnership that could happen among several others.